Good morning, everybody. We're going to look at a landscape of very close to where I live, around West Yorkshire. I've got some gorgeous hills and sunset and evening sunset, late summer, early autumn view. And the first colors we'll need this morning will be some white, yellow, crimson, cadmium yellow, not the lemon yellow, crimson, and violet. And I'll start with a drawing as we normally do with a brush. So I need to have a watery paint. So if I'll have some water on my palette first, then I'll use a little bit of white, bit of yellow. This comes out quite strong. So by the time I'll add some yellow and a little bit maybe extra white, just want to have a color slightly darker than my current orange background so I can see my lines. The reason I'm using more reds, orangey colors today, because we're going to have a lovely sunset. So any influence of extra red and orange will be welcome, even if we have a lot of green trees and green fields. But that darkness of red will be very exciting once we'll start peeping through. So we have the sky, probably a little bit, not the horizon line, for the line for the sky. I'm going to be halfway through my piece, maybe a little bit higher. So I can work and, right, if I just make it a tiny bit darker. So that will come up somewhere here. There is a woodland on a hill here. So I'll just work it a little bit over it. So already just adding that extra red on the orange makes it quite similar to Monet's painting. The impression got some gorgeous reds and oranges and then some blues coming in later on. Right, so that will be my rough shape for the sky. I'll have a couple of clouds coming up here. I just shape them up roughly as an outline. They're going to be cool in color, but that might just give me a little bit of idea of how big or how the volumes of that darkness where it's going to be. I think I might just be stretching this cloud a little bit further than it is in the picture on the photograph, but I think that might work well for me. So I'll use my artistic license for that. A bit tiny, a bit more bigger here. Okay. And I'm just going to top up my colors. And I'll draw is the diagonal of the hill coming down. That's Emley Moor. Nice big hill down. It's lovely hill for sledging at winter. So you can exaggerate its dynamics. I think that's how I'm going to keep that one. I have a wall right in front of me here, but it's in the shadows. So if I'll have just a quick breakdown of that curve, again, it's got that nice diagonal to it. Positioning everything going kind of that way. Okay. And then I have the trees. I have two. I've got a little gap between those blocks of trees. I'm going to try to keep them slightly varied in size. Maybe an individual tree here. Maybe a smaller hedge somewhere here. And behind these closest to us dark trees, you can see a really light green field. That's probably the lightest green we're going to have. So that's when I can use maybe just shape those green fields first, and then I'll see what's left, and maybe I can adjust my sky or the shapes around it. So maybe some more of this green here and somewhere here. And then it also gives me an idea of if this tree needs to be bigger and what the shapes. Now those shapes we can just build up when once we painted the sky. So that gives me an option of playing with them later on. There'll be other woodlands, but we can work with them afterwards. So an interesting start, a bit of orangey red color for our sketch. So my drawing is ready. Right, so my next step is going to be painting the sky. While I have loads of yellows and orangey colors, I'm going to start from the bottom part of the sky, and then I'm going to add a little bit more white and blue afterwards. So I'm going to use my cloth. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just wrap one of my fingers within the cloth, and I'll just dip it in white, some yellow, bit of red. Mix it really well. Okay, maybe a little bit more red for the bottom part of the sky here. And the cloth, if the cloth starts collecting loads of marbly type of effects, just give it a good mix again, and then we can apply nice and soft color. Applying it with a cloth or sponge allows us, I think I might just need a little bit more darker color, to have the paint softer. It merges a bit better, and that's quite nice red. It merges easier with other colors. So for example, if I'm going from a bit more red to a bit more orange to a bit more paler color, then I make a tiny bit more paler on the left, but that more fiery, more yellowy with extra white color somewhere here. So I'm ignoring my dark clouds, okay? Just placing some of this color. It's quite enjoyable seeing the color merge, seeing the color blend. And it becomes quite textured as well. So if you bring that one across and it works for you, fantastic. So if you do want to keep some of that texture, that's brilliant. Now the camera picks up my yellows, a little bit cooler, almost like if it's already some blue in there, but no, there isn't any blue. Oh, it's quite a warm yellow here. Just going to watch for some of the thicknesses of the paint. Just going to merge it a little bit more here, a little softer. Okay. And then I'll have a tiny hint of violet and a lot of white. And overall, right, I think I've got quite a bit of yellow here. So I might just need to put extra white here. The violet with white against the orange background will give us an effect of a pale blue color. So you don't have to use the blue here, at least yet. Okay, now that's come out a bit too light, so I need to have a tiny bit more darkness of violet in there. And again, I'm just going to smudge it all here. If you put too much paint and it becomes too textured and difficult to handle, just take some of it off, or maybe just turn your cloth to a drier section, and it will be not as thick and easy to maneuver. Okay, that's my cloud, so I might get rid of that shape because it's very dark and red, but I know it's where it's going to be. Okay, that's quite an exciting soft merge of colors here. Just going to soften some of this as well. A gorgeous sunset sky. Just going to do this corner slightly cooler here as well. Okay. And while the surface is wet, I'm going to add a slight darkness to the clouds with a cloth as well. So I'll use the same violet, but I will also add a hint of phthalo blue or ultramarine, one of the blues you'll have. Now, the color can come out quite dark, so that's quite a dark tone, but by the time I'll start smudging it and applying it, it should have more violet in your color. Otherwise, if you're painting over some of the reds and yellows, well, mainly of the yellows, you'll end up having loads of green type of color. So if that happens, just maybe remove the blue and add more violet, or if needed, even a hint of red. Because again, against the sky, you will see cooler colors against the warmth of the reds. You will see loads of nice cool colors. And again, while it's soft, we can smudge some of it and can leave some of the edges a bit more sharper. If you find it's a little bit harder to work with the cloth, don't worry, just move to the brush. Or you can just even put a little droplet of water. I think I'm just going to add a tiny bit of water to my cloth. And as part of my sky is drying, that will be a nice soft touch for it. Yeah, I think that's working even better. A tiny bit of water. So part of my background already is drying. So then I've got some nice soft smudges. I can always put some sharper marks of the darker color. Just want to have a little bit of softness in those clouds first. And then I can introduce, I want to have those transparent type of clouds. I don't want it to be too solid. That'd be nice. Now what I think I have lost the freshness of the sky underneath of my cloud, so I might have to come back to it. Okay, and for the other side, I think that side is drying now. That's dry, so I can go for a little bit more fresher blue with my violet. So I'm not going to be scared now it's going to go green because the colors are drying. I'm using a bit of extra white, so it's violet, blue, and a little bit of white. I want to get a lighter version of the cloud on the left-hand side. Oh, that's better. Okay, some dark come out through here. turn my cloth around and find a clean corner. Okay, tiny bit darker on this side, a little bit of an extra cloud here. And that will create the space when we have the sun lighting up different parts of the sky in a different way. So we have one side of the sky a little bit more darker, a bit more bluer, more violety. Another one got those paler tones of real gentle light blue. And I can use a tiny bit of water to soften some of it, or even to wipe to get the shape a little more exciting. I keep rotating my cloth to get a clean edge for it if I'm lifting anything when I'm adding a tiny bit more water. Okay, and I think I can do it with a tiny bit more cloud expanding here. So work with the shapes to vary them, and also make sure you like them. If you don't, wipe them off, maybe reintroduce them, maybe just build it up a little bit more. Okay, that's gone way too dark, sorry. Got some extra darkness in the groove of the and some of the folds of my cloth here. Let me take it off. So it may be a slightly different way of painting the sky to what we've done before, which is an exciting way to explore. Just keep introducing a little bit of light color, a bit of darkness, just to shape up my clouds. Now I think I wiped it off by accident. Okay, let's put it back. And because it is a lot of accidental marks, that's what makes it extra exciting. Okay, that's gone too far, and I think I need to use my sponge to lift it, otherwise I keep reintroducing different colors in the wrong places. So a little bit fiddler, this technique, if you use a small scale for your painting. If you've got a larger surface, it's easier to move about and bring new shapes or smudge the colors. I'll put a tiny bit of light somewhere here as well. So they're interacting together. Okay, I think I'm quite happy with that at the moment. Okay. And we also have a similar pale blue line on the horizon next to them. Well, it's all the hills, it's a big district in the distance there. I think for that, because I need a straighter line, I'm going to use a flat brush. It is. And I'll use the same colors I've been using for those pale blue clouds. So blue and a tiny hint of violet with some white. Ultramarine or phthalo blue, any of the blues will be fine. Because we're mixing it with violet, it's going to give us a similar shape. Right, so I'm going to have a bit more. So in comparison to our clouds, this line has much sharper edges to it. I'm going to try not to keep it just a plain thin line. I'm going to vary it in thickness, vary it in height next to the sky, and then probably lower it. I can always paint over it. Just lower it down so we've got some sort of background. Now, some of my clouds are touching that blue line. I'll let that area dry, and I think I will paint gently the sky in that area as well to have extra depth to the horizon. And similar color, I think I can see just a little bit at behind some of the trees here. So I think I'll just put it a little bit here as well. So we've got a flat color against quite a three-dimensional shapes of the clouds already. But we need that flat color for later to work with our woodlands and everything else. Okay. Okay, so use some extra colors now. I'm adding some extra white, ochre, emerald green, and ultramarine or phthalo blue. I'm going to start painting overall big shape of the foreground. The plan is, again, you can use a sponge or you can use a tissue. I think I'm going to go for a sponge because sponge will cover more area quicker, and also I will have a lot of simplified colors. I'm not going to have so many varieties of kind of dry strokes. So I'm going to mix my green, a little bit of white, a bit more green, some ochre here. So I need a little warmth first. I'm going to have probably the lightest green we're going to use for the field right at the back. So that will be a small area for the gaps. Don't be scared of making it bigger than what it is, because we can shrink it with darker colors. It's going to continue behind the trees. I'm really exaggerating the volume of it, and I'm going to slightly vary its color by adding a bit more ochre, so the same color is not lasting through such a big space. A little mark of that similar lightness there. And then I'll mix some darker green by using pure emerald green and some violet. Talking about darker green, but I don't want it to be, probably the darkest green are going to be on the trees. And I'll work that one with a brush as more fine details. But so far, I want to block the whole foreground of the grasses, including part of the wall, and also some of those trees as well, because they still all together stand out as a silhouette. So I'm just going to connect it all together just to get rid of some of the orange. If you end up with some of the gaps of orange left, the orange background left, that'd be brilliant. If you don't worry about it too much. Okay, I've got a tree here. Okay, that's come out quite dark, but the tree will be dark. But this area here. So if it becomes too dark, your emerald green and violet, add a small amount of ochre to it. You can have tiny bit of white, but probably ochre will be better. So I'm working on all of this area. I'm going to come close to the wall, so I'm not going to lose its edge. A bit of water on my sponge, maybe, so I can see. I can still see a hint of orange background under my strokes, because the paint is not overly thick. And I think I'll just do a little darker line. If it's harder for you to do it with a sponge, maybe do it with a brush. But all I'm going to do, I'm just going to do just covering most of the orange, so it's not going to be too light, too bold jumping at us. I just want to have whole atmosphere of it building up here before I start playing with details. So I quite like the darkness of that tree. That's probably the rest of my tree is going to be that darkness. Right, and then for the foreground where my wall is, so behind the wall, right in front of me, there are loads of shadows. All I see mainly is extra darkness. And I'll keep my strokes vertical. I'm going to try not to paint the fence. So if that's, some of my strokes remind me of the fence, I just need to make sure I'll get rid of it. Okay, so my wall is there. I can still see the shapes of it somewhere. Okay. So my blocking has finished. Now we need a smaller brush. I have my brush with a round end, but it's a flat brush. And I like it for painting smaller curves for the trees, a little details at the back. It just gives me that natural shape very easily. Now on the background, we've got the left-hand side kind of middle area of the fields at the back. That area I've got much more lighter colors. And the right-hand side here, the trees are much more closer to us. They will come out much darker. So let's start with some lighter shapes first. You can differentiate a bit of the fields there as well. So again, I'm going to go for a small amount of white, ochre, and ultramarine, not ultramarine, sorry, and emerald green, and maybe a tiny amount of violet. So I'll paint some of the fields, kind of the shapes of the fields, having a little curvature for them. A bit tiny bit darker for this one, so I'll add a hint more violet there. If this becomes too brown, I know that I can add more green into it. And some more here. So that just shows that volume and the direction of the hills. For those ones who might know the area of Emley Moors, that's a view towards Castle Hill, kind of from Emley, using a tiny bit of lighter color as well. Just want to put a couple of grooves in the fields, again, just to show that texture. There's some depth to it. A bit lighter color to touch up my shapes of the tree line or clustered areas of the woodlands there. So I'm just doing little lights, medium tones. I'm not doing the darks yet for the background. You can vary it by adding a hint more of yellow. So I think I might need a tiny bit of white with it as well, because that will be probably our more of a focal point on the hill. So I might even exaggerate it slightly here. Nice yellowy green. Maybe a tiny bit more yellowy green somewhere here. Right, so now I've done some of the greens. I think I can get rid of some of the brightness of the green here. Let's go and make it a tiny bit more darker. To soften the emerald green from its coolness, to soften it into the warm side, we can add more ochre and droplet of crimson. Let's just try. I think that's would be there's not going to be much of that light green here anyway. There's going to be loads of trees there. I just exaggerated this area quite a lot. That will be a little bit more softer, a little better. By the time I'll add darker trees, I'm just concerned I might end up with too bold, bright green. Okay, let's stand that for the moment, and let's do some more trees for the back. So I'll go for exactly the same color, just having little blobs of shapes of trees, maybe by using the strokes of this rounded end brush. And I'm going to have a darker woodland. I'm just a little tiny woods here. Something a bit more darker here and there. Varying its shapes. You can put an individual tree if we wanted to. I think I'll put a little something, maybe another hedge here. Okay, that's nice. And then coming close to the middle and right hand side, and it's slightly sharper trees here. I want to preserve some of the darkness I already have, but I also want to create these extra shadows. And if I need to play with the silhouette of the trees overall against the sky, that's a perfect opportunity again for me. Trying to make something a bit more taller, but varying them slightly varying them. think this one coming out a bit too similar, so I need to settle it. So any variations of your greens, emerald green with blue, emerald green with violet, emerald green with crimson, that's probably will be the darkest green you will have by mixing crimson and emerald green. And then the same strokes, but slightly wider strokes, will go for the trees in this scent area. Now, some of the trees are really merging with the background trees, which we just done here. But just be careful, kind of follow your own instinct of how much of them you want to work for. Now, I definitely would like to have this single tree coming out, standing out. So I'll paint it extra dark. So I'm using emerald green and crimson. So that will be my extra darker green. Want to have some of the edges for it. Okay. You can always make it lighter, but now it's immediately popped right at the front. And I'll have something darker at the bottom of that ridge. A little bit of extra darkness at the bottom here, but then the rest of the trees here will be a little lighter. So let's make some lighter version of that green. That's a bit too pale. And I need now the silhouettes of those trees to be more important. Still a bit too dark. Okay, I'm gonna leave some of the gaps of my initial green, you know, that big one I've done with a sponge. Just see if you can preserve some of it, and then just work with your brush to build up the other lighter shapes. If you still again preserve some of the orange, that would be exciting. If it disappears, that's okay. Just wiggle your brush a little bit. I think I might need a tiny gap for this tree. Okay, that's coming out way too light. I'm gonna let it dry and come back to this little area. Okay, trees are slowly taking shape. I'm going to carry on with trees a bit more on that side. They're much more lighter here, so be careful not to overwork them. And I'm probably going to go for more bluey colors, less red and less violets in this corner. Most of the darkness will maybe remain in the bottom of that shape. This tiny little white tree. Maybe I can bring that Right, just need to make sure that that tree belongs to the group of trees rather than looks like a gap between the trees. So it means I can make it darker and possibly within the reds and ochres type of greens. If you were to put a little lighter tree here, you might not need to. So our landscape becomes more life now, much more character in it. I quite like that dark green. Might do some more of it for some of the fields divisions. I think it's a wall here or some sort of division within the field, maybe slightly different edges of the field, so it's almost like a line going, but try not to make it perfect straight. Maybe just let it appear thicker and thinner. You can use slightly wet stroke. Maybe there's another one there. Again, that creates a nice perspective for it. Mm-hmm. I'll just touch up my tree. Just this tree. I really like its character. So I'm going to use some similar emerald green and crimson just to finish it off at the bottom here, because I had to paint below the area there. I'm just slightly connecting it to this corner. That's quite good. While we're working with the dark colors, I'm going to introduce some extra darkness for our wall and some of the foreground shapes. Small brush might be trickier to use now, so I think I'm going to put that one aside. I'm going to go for my big flatter brush, one of those ones. So I'm going to use some emerald green, and I'll use this time more one of the blues, ultramarine blue with emerald green, and I'll work into a little bit of the shapes of some of the grasses directions first, just to give myself an idea. I'm gonna try not to make them just all cluttered in as rows. I'll have some big blocks of wider shapes as well. So that's going to be a dark corner here anyway. If it will start coming up too dark, maybe just adds a small amount of ochre to the color. So then it has its darknesses, but we don't want it to be just a block of exaggerated. We don't want that corner to be overwhelming the whole painting. We want it softly staying in its darkness. Okay, so I think maybe something like that here. So I used more wider strokes and a little bit narrower ones with some little darker shapes and some tiny bit lighter shapes as well. And they're slightly differently distributed through. We haven't finished the foreground yet. We've got a few other things to go for it, but that's my just give us a nice starting point. That will be into the cool side instead of reds. Some of the reds are going to come with our rocks. So our smaller brush, the one we use for the trees, could be used for our rocks. Now for the rocks, for the wall, we have, for the wall itself, we have a highlights, kind of the light areas of the tops of the stones, and we'll have the shadows. So let's start with a bit of highlights. Now, to understand what happens to the light in this shadow, first of all, the stone will have some sort of grey tone overall, but we'll also have the pale blue light from the sky. So we'll have a gentle purple, maybe with a small amount of green. I'm just using the palette colors. I've got a small amount of green on my palette, some violet, and some small amount of white. Let me just put one of those strokes. Yeah, okay, that needs to be much lighter. I don't want it to be jumping out at us, but I want it to be maybe tiny bit still lighter. So it's like a grayish violet color. That's why if I'm adding a small amount of green to it, it will preserve it as a gray. Yeah, rather than bold violet. I think that's a better color. This might be a stone standing up. So what I'll do a couple of shapes. I'm going to try to preserve some of my orangey colors. I really like that, but maybe in small quantities. And it's hard to see the exact shapes from the photographs, but if you imagine we've got a rough line of them coming up towards us, you know, from the darkness of the shadows. Just putting some strokes one way and the other way, making them slightly varied. I think I might just make a couple of lighter strokes as well, so a tiny bit more white. I think that will be the lightest still rock stone. Sorry. If your orange, like on my painting, for the wall is a bit too intrusive, you can reduce that amount of orange. But I think what I'll do here, I'll put a couple of more strokes. I think all the rest will stay dark. It's got that nice glow from underneath it at the moment. And to paint the shadow of the wall, I'll use the same colors I used for my trees here. I had violet and green, but this time I'll have more violet on my brush than green. For the trees I had more green, or actually used some of the crimson there as well. So this time, as long as I'll have more violet color, maybe even crimson if you want to, then green in it. So the colors will be corresponding to each other. It might come out very dark, so I need to be careful not to make it super dark. It will need to be darker than parts of the grasses. That's why the grasses I left a little bit of a lighter shape next to the rocks. Yeah, so the grass has almost got a bit of a distance. The darker grass has got almost a bit of a distance. And what I'll do for the shadows, I'll almost semi outline some of the shapes, some of my light shapes here. If they become too bold, I might come close more to green, to greeny type of color, tiny bit lighter, because the wall will be all within the same darkness. Okay, that's come out too light. The wall and the grasses will belong to each other, and they're within the same light. They're within the same settings, within the same environment. Some of the shadows, it's quite difficult to say if it's a grass or if it is a shadow from the wall, on the wall. So my orange is now slowly disappearing now. And what I'll do, I'll start painting almost like identifying which areas the grass is still kind of chopping into the greens here to create the tops of the grasses, and maybe going even over that area as well to show that they're standing out here as well. Actually, don't know if I like that one. Came out a little bit fence-like here. Okay, just touching up some more shapes. I've got some orange left here. It looks quite mysterious corner. I really like it. I'm not sure what that might be, but I quite like it with the light. I think I might leave it for the time being and discover what I can do with it or how it will stay. I think we're ready now to put a little bit more highlights on our fields at the back and maybe on this closer to us hill, just very small amounts, and then we can work into some highlights on the grasses here in front of us and maybe some flowers as well. So I'm going to start with a smaller brush. I'm going to get a little bit lighter color than some of these lighter greens. So that was emerald green, yellow, and some white. A very light and very happy type of green color. We only need a small amount of it. However, I will mix enough to do a nice juicy stroke there, making sure that it's not a runny paint, but it's much more thicker paint. Just mixing it really well. And I'll put it probably on the top of this hill. Okay. And something similar, just maybe below it. Trying to keep them a bit more horizontal. So it just shows that the top of the hill is lit up. Just be careful when you're doing it. If it feels too much, maybe remove it. Maybe you already had a good color there. Maybe only need a tiny touch. If you need to use a sponge, that's what I'm doing now to soften some of the edges. I think if I'll soften it a bit more, it's not going to be as intrusive. Feel something needs to be there, but not too strong. You just got a bit more focal point on that area. Like the last lightest touch in the fields there. I think also I'm going to put a tiny bit more lighter stroke in between the trees and see if that will work. I'll put a bit more darkness, maybe a little bit more darkness into the similar green I just used. It will appear a bit more lighter than it is, yes. Okay, so the color is good. Let's have a look if it keeps well here. Yes, I think so. No, that's might be too much. I think I had my lighter tree here. It's dried out much darker, so just breaks up that overall dark shadow. It also gets a bit of a whispery, almost like a little foggy shapes of the bushes right here in this corner. Almost like a damp air of the evening of the sunset. Again, that's personal choice to start adding little elements like that. See how it feels on your piece. I think they also correspond well with some highlights on a wall. I think that is what's happening. And another slightly paler green, maybe a warmer green, maybe ochre, emerald green, and crimson, but a lighter version of the color could come for this part of the field. Very, very gently. Again, just carefully applied and watched if it's too much. I think I want it somewhere a bit more here. A little bit more warmth, more crimson, more ochre. So it belongs to this field. Okay, let's another go. Tiny bit more, still warmth in the green. And I think I'm going to try it on that side. Yes, that's better. And something maybe a little bit more solid. So it's just subtones of that green. You might see it not overly significant, but that's enough to make that small differentiation of the tones. Okay, it's a tiny bit better, so maybe in the shape of the grasses or direction of the grasses, how the grasses are just falling. So need to be careful with the strokes not being too intrusively large or overly shaped. I do like that foggy, cool color on the bushes under the dark trees. I think I might touch that coolness again. Maybe it's the reflections of them from the sky. I think I'll have a tiny bit of that coolness somewhere here. Maybe part of that white, that darker, the darker line. Maybe it's part of that wall reflection. Just see how it feels. If it's not intrusive, add some. If it becomes too much, just gives that yeah, reflection from the skies. Yes, I like that a lot. And then we're ready for some highlights on the grasses. I'm going to use the same color here I've been using. So it's some sort of bluey green, quite a cool gray blue, kind of to give that reflection for the sky. So I'll start with very small. Now, if you look at the actual photograph, it's just super dark. But if we do look into it, there are some interesting elements. So I'm going to exaggerate the highlights. I'm going to just do small amounts of them. Just on the tops of some of the grasses, maybe the ones which are coming out a little bit stronger, a little bit higher than the others. Find maybe some key areas where there's some solid shadows. Okay. Close to some of my orangey highlighted area here. If you wanted to use a piece of card and just paint some of that color on the edge, or dip the card into in your color in the palette, you can put a couple of couple of grass marks. Yeah, we'll give you some lovely natural shapes. Just be careful not to do them too dark or too many of the, sorry, too dark, too bold in lightness. If it comes out strong, wipe it off. Maybe load a less color on the card, or maybe pick up a slightly darker tone. And the card is not loaded strongly with the paint, the strokes become belonging to the environment. You can do the same with a little bit of extra darker tones. I might just put a tiny bit of that darkness and come back to some medium colors. I'll mix them colors with a brush, but then place it with the card. If you prefer the brush to the card, or wooden wedge, or anything else, it doesn't matter. And just placing, I think that's could be a tiny bit lighter. My medium tone could be a tiny bit darker. Sorry, tiny bit lighter. And just right, so if the card starts collecting a lot of paint, just take it off the edge, put it back on your palette, and just have it on the actual edge. That will give you much more precision. Got that lovely whispery feel. Whispery light. Got that feel of warmth. Of the last sunset of the end of the summer. Again, help yourself with the brush if it's a little easier for you. Whichever the method, just don't struggle, just give it a try. Sometimes I know the brush could give us too heavy-handed strokes. Now I have an area in front of the wall, just about here, where I have a bit of extra darkness here from initial sketch with a sponge. So I'm going to create a bit more pleasant shape, or just paint a tone lighter green, then define the shapes of the wall there, shapes of the stones. Yeah, I think if I start identifying grasses, they become too intrusive, too strong in silhouette. But when this area dries, I think I will be adding a tiny bit more darker strokes for the some of these grasses, just tiny bit. So it just doesn't look blank. And then we can come back to the sky and touch up part of the sky. And maybe bring some of the highlights of the sky on our grasses as well. Let's see how it goes. Tiny little nuances here for grasses. So we've done an extremely good job. Some of our earlier paintings with the grasses, so well done. Minor changes in darkness, so they're not jumping at us. We're not losing what's important in the whole painting. Okay, now I'm stepping away from my piece, and I can actually see, before I come back to my sky, I can do little nuances around the wall, maybe happy dots, little dark spots of emerald green and crimson, just to have some of the shapes balanced. I think I could do with a couple of very small marks here and there. Okay, they just need to be carefully done so they're not overwhelming or not jumpy too much. Tiny bit of darkness, extra darkness. I think that's too much. Let's have to go. Be ruthless. If you don't like something, take it off. Just painting just between the grasses here. I think I can tame some of my orange here as well. Light. Putting extra darks around it, it's actually lighten it up even better. Anything else dark, I need to come a bit more here. That's probably enough for the foreground. Yeah, really happy with that. Let's come back now to the sky and the foreground, the background. Now the pale blue, the moment on my painting, it does look like a beautiful cloud. If you prefer to keep it like that, that's fine. But I'm going to try to make it belonging to the kind of the landscape behind it. So I'm going to introduce slightly darker version of it. I use some ultramarine, violet, and some white. Just gonna have a tiny bit more darker tone here. Bring some extra hills at the back. If I don't like it and I prefer to keep the previous color together with the orange, that's my, I can just wipe things off or just can repaint it over. I quite like that orange here, but I do want to show that space of the whole valley behind. That's lovely purpley color. Gives me that distant space. Oh, that's really dramatic now. Exciting, dramatic light. Just going to just come close to some of the trees so they don't look of silly cone shapes. If you do overpaint the tops of your trees, you can always reintroduce some of that green back. And that looks better. I can even do tiny bit more darker tone and put a couple of spots of extra darkness there. Just make sure I have mixed my paint well. Maybe a little corner cross. Again, just shows the distance. That's nice. And again, less is more. So I'm not going to overwork it. That's good. I really like that color. I might bring a tiny bit more into one of my clouds, but I just need to make sure I'll keep everything as soft and fluffy. So I'll have my sponge close to me just to blend some of that color so it's not too intrusive to my initial clouds. That will dry much paler. So that's good. I'll be using the finger to smudge. And I think I can have a tiny bit more volume to one of these clouds here. Again, if you're happy with your clouds, you might not need to do any of this. If you do want to add a bit more darkness and play with new shapes on top, be brave, try it. You've got a close to you, maybe a sponge or cloth, and you can wipe it off. So I'm going to soften, I think, some of these edges. I'm not going to make some of these clouds too intrusive. Good. Maybe a tiny bit more darkness to this dark cloud. Right, I need more of a similar color I was using before, crimson and a violet, crimson and some blue. So if I'll put a section and then just give it a bit more transparent smudge. So then the volume stays in, but the texture of the cloud is not changing. Okay, it's become less transparent. Might need to partially go. Okay, that's better again. And I think I'll have a little overlap of extra small dark clouds here as well. To create that. That's another lovely feel for the depths of the cloud. And maybe I think that dictates to me that that could have slight depths to it as well. So I'm not quite looking now at the painting, sorry, at the photograph. I'm working with my painting on its own. What feels maybe right to have extra depth. I think my clouds are looking much better now. And I'm ready to do a tiny bit more color for the sky itself, not just the clouds, but a bit more orange and the red tone. So what we had some white, had some cadmium yellow, and crimson. I'm just going to dot about in a few areas to tidy my blue chunk of the line close to the horizon. Okay, so I think I'm ready for the color. I just came out a little bit too boring. On the photograph, it's a straight line. I don't think it's working for me. Here's more of a straightish line. So I think I'm going to work into that. And just see it as a silhouette. Maybe leaving some of that blue line into new clouds, shapes, and formations. You can use much more thicker strokes. If some of your blues are still wet and you're overlapping them, be careful because it will give you a mucky color. So you might need to all wait for it to dry or do a couple of layers of the same color. Tiny bit stronger red here, I think. More. Maybe keep wiping your brush if it starts getting too much paint in it. Some of the fresher reds where I might have lost it. Not too much texture. I'm just going to soften some of my texture, otherwise it's a little overwhelming volume of it. A bit more darkness of red in this corner. And at the same time, tiny bit of extra highlight of orange. Maybe on the tops of the trees here. Again, just enjoy yourself of putting a few strokes here and there and watching how the sky is changing. So the sun might be right, just set kind of in this area. So if you are bringing some extra light in here with white and yellow, that will be the area to do that. I don't want to overdo it. And while I've got those colors on my brush, as I said, we're going to touch it up very, very lightly in a couple of areas on the foreground. So wiping my brush so it's not going to have loads of thick paint, which I've been using for the sky. And I'll top it up. It's on my couple of edges of the grasses. So if I don't like it, I can wipe it off somewhere here. Maybe a tiny bit more water on my brush so it's more diluted strokes. Again, they will settle in much more gentler rather than very thick, wide ones. Just want that playfulness of light. I keep topping up a tiny bit more water on my brush and then just mixing it on the palette with my existing amount of paint on the bristles. That gives it softer lines. Okay, that's maybe a bit too strong. Into a tiny bit of white somewhere here. I want to be them all the same or the same volume. A bit more cluttered than less elsewhere. I think I will add small amount on some of the stones. Again, just to see if that's something. Yeah, I need to be careful. Yeah, that's maybe too much. Because if I add the small amount of orange on the rocks, on the stones, on the wall, start competing with the grasses. So I think I might leave it out. But I'm thinking of adding an extra orange light. Maybe somewhere here. Maybe it's catching up over here on the line. Maybe too much. But that looks good. Combine those ones together. Or can put, you know, some of the little orange gaps here. I think I might reintroduce them. Maybe a little bit on this corner. Again, that's an extra development of the painting, an extra bonus. Okay, so that's a bit too strong as well. That's okay. Smudging it, softening them, that's okay, that's lovely. And we have a windmill as well. If you wanted to edit, I think the position of my windmill will need to go somewhere on the photograph. It's somewhere here, but I think it will offset the balance on my painting. So I think if I'll put one here, I'll put one there. So it will kind of go with that big tree and that whole diagonal. It will counterbalance it somewhere here. Again, don't feel that you have to put it in, and make sure if you do, you paint it on a dry surface. So if the lines come out too dark or too thick, or something you're not happy with, you can remove it and give it another go. So I'll use a small flat brush like this. I'll show it a bit better. So then it will be easier for me to work into the tones. And the colors I'd like to use for the windmill, something similar to what I used for the clouds. So it's violet and blue and some white. You don't have to do it as a line. You can just press against the landscape. Oh, excuse me, I've knocked my camera. So I'll put a stroke and decide if that's a good height. Because the windmill is on a higher position when it was moved, when it was an original photograph. If I'm moving it to different directions, it can't be as tall. So I need to make sure, otherwise it's gonna start looking huge. Right, maybe I'll put it somewhere here. Okay, just as a little silhouette. And then the 3 strokes forwards. That's about it. Just double check if it's standing straight. Tiny bit wider shapes towards its center. And it's there, but it's not overly jumping at us. And it's also, it's nice and narrow lines correspond with the shapes of our grasses as well. I don't think we'll need to highlight a bit in the bottom. I'll put a tiny bit more white on my brush. I'll put it at the bottom and see if that's any good. That's too thick. And I think as a silhouette, it looks better. And I think I'm going to stop with that.